very, very excited to introduce our first speaker. So our first speaker for today is Nick van Wiggeren, as I mentioned, who's the Director of Engineering at PlanetScale. And at PlanetScale, he runs teams responsible for the API, the front end, the database clients, and much more. And prior to working at PlanetScale, he worked all over the GitHub product and in many other developer-facing products that you may and hopefully love. So now, without any further delay, I'm excited to bring to the stage Nick van Wiggeren. How's it going, Nick?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well. I think the last time we spoke was Prisma Day back in the end of June. And since then, I've been following the PlanetScale progress. You have a beautiful change log. So first of all, kudos on that. It's really nice to follow the changes there. But besides that, you've been releasing a lot of new features recently. And this is, I believe, what you will be speaking about today.
Yeah, when I talked at Prisma Day, there was a lot of excitement, but we were still missing some key product functionality, I think, to make Prisma and other tools as useful as possible. So we've had a couple of months to make the experience better, and I'm very happy to be able to talk about what we've built and show off some of those features that make PlanetScale such a great product.
Great. Well, let's get right into it. Do you want to share your screen?
Yep, let's do that right now. Let's go there, and that is shared. Can hop right into Keynote really fast. You let me know when it looks good.
Okay, we're good to go. I'll bring you on.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. So I'm going to go over to Keynote here so that you don't just see the infinite recursion that is the Chrome window. And I'll go ahead and reintroduce myself. My name is Nick, and I am here to talk about PlanetScale and Prisma Part 2. So I was lucky enough to be able to have a talk at Prisma Day a couple of months ago, where I gave a demo about some of the fantastic PlanetScale features, things like database branching, and talk a little bit about what and why we built PlanetScale. There were also a number of parts of the product that were a little rough around the edges, especially for folks using Prisma. So we knew we had to make it better. We went back to the drawing board, and a couple of months later, I am incredibly excited to be able to share some of the additions that we've made to the product that make for what some people have called a superpower or an amazing set of database features. So before I launch into it, I want to make sure that I share some background for folks that may have not watched my Prisma Day talk or maybe may not be super familiar with PlanetScale. So to take it back from square one, PlanetScale is a MySQL compatible database as a service offering built on top of an open source project called Vitess. Vitess was built at YouTube many, many, many moons ago to provide for the hyperscale that a website like YouTube requires. You can think of all of the data that needs to be stored, counted, and spread across multiple machines. Single MySQL instances just don't cut it at that scale. And so Vitess was built to make it possible to run websites that get billions of views a day and have to keep track of what everybody is watching. So our goal is to be the best database as a service, the best, not just the best hosted MySQL, but the best database as a service. And we can offer that thanks to the incredible capability that Vitess provides, as well as some of our secret sauce that we've added on top from our experience building applications at scale at a bunch of different companies in our background. So as I mentioned, last time I showed off some of the product, but it was missing a few features. Connection strings were lacking, so it was very difficult to connect to the product. We didn't automatically track Prisma migrations and things like that. So the big thing that we've done since the last time I talked was connection strings. And that means that you can now go connect right to PlanetScale from the command line with the MySQL command line, or just by setting a database URL in Prisma. It's amazing. It works super well, and I will show it off in a moment. We also just today released a query analytics part of the product. And what that does is that actually does a live collation of all the queries that you're running against the database, sums and counts up how many rows have been affected, how many rows have been returned, and what the performance of those queries is. So it actually gives you kind of a real window into how your queries are performing on PlanetScale and what may be going well, what may not be going well. If you're curious about that, I'd highly recommend checking out the planetscale.com blog, we've got a ton of great information, including a story about how that feature helped us optimize our own application by adding some indexes and changing around some bad queries. And then the last feature, not the last feature that I'll talk about here is Prisma migration metadata tracking. So much like Rails uses a schema migrations table and many other ORMs have this pattern, PlanetScale is now able to track what migrations have been run by Prisma and copy it over from branch to branch to make the branching workflow work a lot better. Would highly also recommend checking our documentation out on that at docs.planetscale.com. It makes using Prisma and it makes using our branching workflow that much more powerful. I'm personally tired of looking at my slides with a few words on them, and I would much rather show off the product in person. So I'm going to go over back to Chrome. Pardon this for a second. I'm going to go switch windows, and I'm going to show off the PlanetScale product. So this is the homepage. This has my list of databases and some stats about them. And I'm going to go into my Prisma Meetup 7, that's this Prisma Meetup database, and start to talk about some of the changes, and then actually use the database. So one of the big shifts, one of the big changes that we've made is that you can now go ahead and promote your main branch, which means when you create your first branch comes up as a development branch, which means you can change the schema on it directly. Previously, the first branch that you created was what we call a production branch, which means that the schema can only be changed by creating a second branch and basically opening a pull request. Now that we've done this, we can actually get started much faster. So I'm going to go ahead and click in on main, and I'm going to go ahead and create a password for this database. And this is that connection string feature that I was talking about. So instead of having to use pscale shell or pscale connect, create a proxy, and jump through a bunch of hoops.
Nick, would it be possible to zoom in a bit?
Yep.
Sorry to pause
Oh,
you
you're
there.
good. No, you're good. I'm zoomed in a bit, but is that better?
I would go even one more.
One more. Okay. How's
Perfect.
that? Sweet. Hopefully everything else is zoomed in. If not, just go ahead and let me know. So over here, I've got my PlanetScale main branch of my Prisma Meetup database, and I've created a connection string for it. So you can see the password has got an automatically generated name, and I can actually go ahead and just go to the Prisma format, and you can see we've got the data source, username, password, and configuration all set up. So before we move forward, I'm going to go switch over to my IDE, where I will also zoom in a bit more. That's not zoomed in enough, just let me know. And I will go over the demo application that I made to show off PlanetScale, Prisma, and connection strings. So really, it's just about 30 lines of code that I wrote here. And all it does is on a loop, it inserts some random data, a UUID, as well as the host name of the machine that's inserting the data. And it just does this every 10 seconds, forever and ever and ever and ever, inserting into the database. If we go over to my schema, we can see I've just got one model here. That's a integer, a created at for when the data has been inserted, my host name, and my random data. And then I've got my PlanetScale database configured right here. So I'm going to go back to the PlanetScale website. And I'm just going to grab that database URL right there. And I'm going to go put it in my environment so that my local development now can talk to the database. I'm going to go back to my command line, and I'm just going to push that schema up right there.
Nick,
So,
could you make that also bigger?
yep, sorry about that.
Even a little bit more?
Whew. All right,
Alright, yeah.
it's about as big as it'll go. How's that? Awesome. So as you can see, hopefully now you can see, I've just done a Prisma DB push, so it connected to my PlanetScale database in the cloud, no proxies, no command line, and pushed my schema up. I'm going to go back over here and show off another feature that is coming soon. So I'm going to go over to the console, and this is now a web console connected to my production database where I can actually run some queries. So this is coming soon, and it's just another way to really quickly connect to the PlanetScale database, not have to jump through all those hoops. So we can see that the Prisma ORM went and created my data table, and I can see that there's nothing in it. 0 rows in data because all I did was create it. So if I go back to over here, and I'll just run this really fast. So that's that loop. And we can see here, all I'm doing is inserting my random data and my host name. And I've got Prisma set to debug. And then if I go back and run this again, what we've just seen is my local laptop is already busy away at inserting random rows. So what we've demonstrated here is that with PlanetScale's connection strings and Prisma, we can very easily go from creating a database, just copying and pasting the database URL, setting up a schema, and pushing it to PlanetScale. But look, that's something that everyone can do. That's nothing super wild. Another benefit of PlanetScale, and something that I've talked about quite a bit at my Prisma Day conference and elsewhere, is because we're built on Vitess, we can handle an insane amount of queries, an awesome amount of connections to the database. Unlike other databases, we don't have to worry about proxy SQL or PG Bouncer or anything like that. So as part of this, what I've also done is set up a Kubernetes cluster on DigitalOcean, which I can go over and show right here. That's just got 10 nodes in it. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy this application out on that Kubernetes cluster. So we'll start off by just doing 3 of them. And we are going to, before I do that, I have to create the password so it knows how to connect. So just like anywhere else, we've got to go ahead and pass in the database URL. So I'll grab that from my environment right here, and I will go ahead and add that in. And one thing to note is that there's a bug I'll talk about. Right now, you have to pass the path to your machine's certificates. This is fixed and will be fixed in the latest Prisma release. But right now, I've got this bookmarked because my Kubernetes cluster is running a Debian derivative. I just passed this back in right there, and I've created the secret. So now that we have the secret created, and we'll go back to that Kubernetes definition right here, we've set database URL to be the URL from the database secret. We've got this container that I've built from this code, and we're going to run 3 replicas. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run apply on the deployment. And as we can see with this handy dandy command line tool, that's just going to go ahead and that's going to create 3 running pods, running this exact code. I can go in right here and I can see we've got 1 container that is in state running. And I can actually go ahead and I can see that it is inserting values. So we've done the same thing I did on my personal laptop. We've gone ahead and run this service. We've just got a few more instances. And if I go back over to the console, I bet I can see that indeed we've got now 360 rows and a bunch more data inserted in here. Again, neat and fun. We've deployed a service to Kubernetes, but not super interesting. So let's take it up a notch. Instead of 3, let's run 300 and see what happens. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to exit this, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply. And we're going to see right now, Kubernetes is going to spend some time doing a little bit of work. And I just want to take a second here and talk about, again, why this is so much fun. A lot of serverless applications, a lot of applications have a connection problem. When you're deploying things into something like Lambda, what often happens is you have so many instances running, or when you're deploying, you have twice the number of instances running for the old and the new, that you end up in a situation where your database can't accept any new connections and starts to error out. I've tested PlanetScale to take thousands or tens of thousands of connections with no problem. I've actually gotten this up to about 500 instances before, absolutely no problem. So we're going to go back into this, and now we can see we've got a whole lot more of these either in running or in creating. And Kubernetes is going to take some time to churn through this. It's not easy, but if I go into any one of these, I can go ahead and I can see again, we've got connections. It's just going no problem. In fact, it's going to warn me that I'm using too much CPU while it creates all of these, but that's fine with me. So if I go ahead and get the logs, or if I go ahead and get the list of pods, and just grab the logs from one of them, I can again see that we've got no issue here. Prisma is starting up, it's inserting, we're doing 5 connections per container, and we've got 300 containers running right now. So what's 5 times 300? That's the number of connections that we've got open to PlanetScale right now, and it's not even a problem. You can see these are all running, they're not crashing. I can get the logs of any of these, and well, some of them probably are still creating, but isn't causing an issue. We're just inserting this data over and over and over again into this database without issue. If I go back here and I look at the count of this data, I bet we've got already 31,000 rows inserted. And I bet I can even do, see if I can make my SQL right. Host name. Oh, doesn't like that. I'll remember how to do that later, but we would see probably around 300 unique host names because we've got 300 of these running, no problem, without issue. So we'll just go back one more time to show that off. And my CPU warning's gone. Now we've still got 300 pods with most of them running no problem. Magic. And that's the power of PlanetScale right there. We scaled our application. We went from 0. We went from absolutely nothing being connected from my local development environment where we got 1. And now we have this deployed in what would look like production with 300 instances of this. And if you see here, PlanetScale is not breaking a sweat. We can go ahead and it's not a problem. And that is why I always tell people PlanetScale is great. You just don't have to think about these things. No one should have to think about connection pooling. No one should have to think about configuring their connections. All I've done here is create a new client and start to query away and insert data like nothing ever happened. So now that that's done, I am going to go ahead and flip back to Keynote and just do a quick recap. So again, when we talk about PlanetScale and Prisma, we're not just talking about can they work together. We're not just talking about something that you can hack together and something that you can make work. What PlanetScale sets out to do is create one of the best, if not the best, database experiences with Prisma. We want to be able to offer Prisma configuration right in the UI so that you don't have to check about how to configure your database. We want you not to worry about connection pools and not to worry about how to deploy, but we want you to think about building your application and how can you build your application. We didn't talk today about the deployment flow because I didn't have time, but if you check out my Prisma Day talk, which is on YouTube, you can see how PlanetScale also makes it incredibly easy to do safe schema changes with just using Prisma DB push and a couple of clicks in the UI. You can have your production environment look exactly like you want with that great flow. And then the last thing that I'll talk about here before we go to Q&A is this issue number 8843. If you go back to the UI and we look at this connection string again, that issue covers needing to do the SSL cert parameter in Prisma. And in the next release of Prisma, that just won't be necessary, and it'll remove another little barrier of adoption. So my ask for everyone is go try this out. Go try out Prisma and PlanetScale together. I think in the last 60 days, we've created a great user experience from what was an already good user experience, and I'm sure there's more. I would personally love to hear from everyone who tries this out. I would personally love to hear how you're faring and how things are going, because I do believe that this is one of the easiest ways to both create, manage, and scale a database that exists right now. So yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now, and I'm gonna go over to Q&A.
Nick, that was really, really great. 300 containers, I believe probably each one of them would open up at least 2 connections to PlanetScale, and it didn't break a sweat, as you said. So that was really cool to watch. Thank you for the demo. And I thought that some of our viewers may not be familiar with Kubernetes, and so it's worth maybe sort of explaining some of the relationships between, say, Kubernetes and something like serverless, because essentially... Yeah. Do you want to get into that?
I would love to. So Kubernetes is a great piece of software. We use it a lot internally at PlanetScale, but it's also very complex. And I use it in my demos because it's the fastest way to get a bunch of containers out there. Normally, a lot of that complexity is managed by, Vercel or something like that, which can dynamically scale up and scale down the number of workers. And so when I talk about, using Kubernetes and scaling out with serverless, I really mean that you just don't have to worry about the number of containers that your service is rolling out. Whether it's one, whether it's 500, whether it's 1,000, your serverless, system should be able to take care of that. I just can't necessarily make Vercel deploy 300 containers for me in the span of a demo. But the thing that we want people to take away is that PlanetScale is built for serverless. PlanetScale is ready for serverless, and it doesn't matter how far out you need to scale in that regard. It'll just keep on going, no problem.
Great. Let's see if we have any questions from the audience. Yeah, we had a really nice comment from Martin, one of our community members, who it seems has been having a really, really good experience. So thank you for that, Martin. Always nice to hear from you. Alex, too, is also one of Prisma team members. He's also been using it for a side project and he's loving it. And I think that was it in terms of the questions from the audience. There was a question that I had to you when it comes to migrations, schema migrations, and how they would sort of work with PlanetScale. Because essentially, traditionally, sort of if you were used to using Ruby on Rails or with Prisma, the idea is that you create these incremental migrations. You try to avoid as many breaking changes as possible, and then you roll those out sort of incrementally. In a way that if you're doing this together with your application code, as long as you're not introducing too many breaking changes, you can you don't need to sort of synchronize both the schema change and the code change. And so that's sort of how it's been thought of. And then PlanetScale, you came along and you introduced this idea of branching for databases. How does, what is a database branch in PlanetScale?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a database branch is just the same as any other database. It's an entire database with a copy of your up-to-date schema that you can play around with, modify, add data to. It's like a Git branch. And the idea is that just like Git branching lets you experiment with your code, no developer ever sets out and goes, oh, I have to make a change. How am I going to get my code set up so that I can go and make some code changes? You just create a new Git branch and you start doing whatever you want. And if it breaks, it breaks. If it doesn't break, if CI passes, you're totally good. And we want databases to feel the same way. No one should ever have to dread making a database change. And I've been there at many jobs, just not even wanting to make one or knowing it's going to take me weeks. We have a blog post about this, but here at PlanetScale, we do 5 database changes a day, across the entire team, just because it's so easy. And it makes making backwards compatible changes and things like that so much more fun, because you just never have to worry about getting a migration through a process or anything like that. You just go branch, make your changes, and then in PlanetScale you go, let's see my diff, just like you would in a pull request, and then you click merge, and then your database gets changed. There was one thing I forgot to show off, and that's the query stats feature as well. So I would highly recommend checking out our blog post on PlanetScale, and highly recommend going and looking at that tab on your PlanetScale database, because it really is an amazing insight into what we're able to provide and kind of how your database is looking.
So coming back, so thank you for that. Maybe we can even get back to that. So essentially the process is when I create a branch on PlanetScale, it copies over the schema. It doesn't copy over the data from the main branch, right?
Yep.
So and now I have this. So now I have this new branch and I'm ready to carry out some changes. So I create a new migration using, say, Prisma Migrate. And then I use the Prisma Migrate deploy after I've tested that locally and it feels good. And then the schema changes are carried out inside the inside this new branch on PlanetScale. And the changes are also recorded in this _Prisma _migrations table. And then when I go ahead and I merge that PlanetScale branch, database branch, essentially it carries over the schema changes from the branch onto the branch that I'm merging into.
Yep. That's exactly it. And one of the things that we experiment with is actually not even using a local database, but just using a PlanetScale database to test stuff out in. Because they're completely isolated, you can actually just create a branch and like do like I did and just change your local database URL to point to that branch. And then you don't even have to worry about that step of testing locally and pushing up. You just use your PlanetScale branch like a local, a local database instance. And when you're done, you just go in and do the equivalent of opening a pull request.
Gotcha. Nick, I'm really excited to give out the new features a go. We also had two questions from the audience who asked about pricing. And I think that's probably one of the most underrated features of PlanetScale. It's you have a very simple and understandable pricing model that also has a very generous free plan. Do you want to speak to that maybe, or even share the pricing page?
Yeah, so I would highly recommend going to planetscale.com and checking out the pricing page. That's planetscale.com/pricing. If you take a look, one of the things that we really believe in is that developers should be able to get the tools they need to kind of start their project, start their website, or start their business without having to pay a bunch of money. So PlanetScale's free tier offers 3 databases, each with 10 gigabytes of storage and 100 million rows read and 10 million rows written per month, completely free. And that is more than enough, we think, to really launch an actual website, an actual business, and scale to the point where you actually start to be needing to pay more. So more so than RDS, even more so than any other database solution, I think the big thing is we want to make it easy to get started. We want to make it easy to go from 0 to 1. And hopefully by the time your business is scaling out past this free tier, you've got some momentum, some wind behind your sails. So no credit card required. Sign up, confirm your email, and then it's completely free. And it's the same set of tools and everything like that you get, from any other plan.
Wonderful. And what is coming up next for PlanetScale? What can we expect? You have quite an impressive cadence.
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of the stuff that I showed off, we've got that web console coming out soon. We're really looking at how we do some of the branch flow to make it easier to get started. So giving you an unprotected or a development database to start off with and letting you promote multiple production branches. So you can have like a production, a staging, a test and stuff like that all can be migrated into. And we're also looking at a bunch of other things. Data branching is one that we hear a lot. It's schema branching today. We'd love to be able to copy data over as part of that process. We're investigating that and really just making sure that PlanetScale remains stable, secure, solid, and then listening to our users and figuring out what they think the product is missing. So that's why I always ask people, try it out, give it a whirl. We're very responsive, and we really want to make sure that we're giving the people what they want. But that means we need to hear what the people want.
Got it. Nick, it's been a delight having you. Thank you once again for the impressive demo. I'm excited to already tweet about this. I've got a screenshot of you with the CLI tool for Kubernetes showing, I think, 300 containers.
Yep.
So yeah, thank you. And I look forward to trying this out, some of the new features to the query console coming out, and hope to have you here soon again.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day or night.